a three-time New York Times bestseller. Yeah. Winning 10-10-10 now. And I mean, 10-10 is a great book, by the way.
Coming back.
Yeah, it's a great book. And you do have some of the lessons from 10-10-10 woven into this book. And now Becoming You. Becoming You. So before we get into the interview with Suzy, I wanted to just take a moment to thank everybody for coming out. You know, I think especially given what's going on in Los Angeles right now, Suzy's work could not be more important. So I just wanted to take a moment to recognize everybody for coming out, and we're so excited to get into this really inspirational conversation. And one of the things that I love about Suzy, there's so much to love about Suzy, but it's really the way that you create these important and helpful frameworks for us as you are creating these amazing books that are so amazing to read. So I love Becoming You. It has become my favorite book that you've written so far. But I have the great privilege of knowing Suzy Welch for over 10 years. And she's just such a special soul. And I'm really excited to get into this.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I love you so much. Thank you for coming. And I love you very much too.
Well, she's also a professor at New York University, NYU Stern School of Business. So if you want to learn more after this, I encourage you to check out her website and her social media, as well as her amazing podcast. But you too can enroll in Becoming You after this. So, but we'll get to that. So what has been said about this book? What has been said? I think it's wise and brilliant. Does anybody know Haley Steinfeld?
Yes,
right? Sir. And our dear friend, Hoda Kotb, says, let Suzy Welch be your guide. She has been mine on many occasions. So she's also been mine. And if you take her advice, you'll have a great life. I'll just put it out there. So, but I think we all just will, you know, when Hoda says it's a great book, we know it's a great book. So no, we're so excited to get into it. You know, and in the book, you say that that happiness is not something to chase. It's really the result of building a meaningful and aligned life. Yeah. Talk to us about that.
Okay. This is, hi again. This is not like an original thought that I'm not, while I have good friends inside of it, I am not part of the happiness industrial complex, which basically says that happiness is the goal. And I think happiness is a byproduct if we're very lucky. And that happiness is a wonderful thing. I'm like not the happiness bully. I want you to be happy. I want everyone to be happy, but I don't like the idea that can be too often peddled that like happiness is just something we just have to try harder to get, because we can do everything right and happiness can be very fleeting. Because life happens and somebody we love dies or a kid goes off the rails. Not that I have any personal experience with that or anything. But, you know, I think that the best, most sustainable road that I can recommend is that you seek a meaningful life, a productive life, and a very connected life. And then you're most likely not just for happiness, but joy. And so the work of Becoming You is helping you figure out what that life actually looks like. It's not going to fall out of the sky. It's the work of our life to figure out what that life is and then start the journey towards it. There is like no hack to this. There's no silver bullet. And I just, you know, when my students come in the first day of class, I say, like, if you think this class is easy and it's a happiness class, please give your seat to someone who is on the wait list, because this is a hard class and you're going to cry. It's called the class where everyone cries. Everyone cries. And you're going to, you know, you're going to probably have some moments of like that are going to be a little uncomfortable. But at the end, you're probably going to know more about your purpose. You're definitely going to know your values. You're definitely going to know your aptitudes. You know what your economically viable interests are. And you're going to have a better sense of where you should go. You're not going to get there tomorrow. I'm sorry, I can't deliver that. But the journey there can be very beautiful with moments of happiness. But I just don't think that you get to happiness and you get to stay there. That's not been my experience, but not that I want all of you to be very happy. I would like me to be happy. But I don't want to hold out this false hope. I just don't do that.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I love so much about you. And in fact, your book Winning, you talk about candor, and that is one thing you can always count on Suzy Welch to be is candid and real. So yes, thank you.
Sometimes too much, but I'm trying.
We love it. We love it. We love it. So this book, it was inspired by your own journey. Talk to us about that.
Okay. All right. So I had a good life, a great life. For many years, I was mainly a broadcast journalist. I started off as a journalist, and I did some consulting in business school. And my career, I was always in sort of the business space of covering careers and as a writer and as a reporter. And that's how I met Karissa, because I was working on the Today Show, and one of their favorite things was like your lashes. And they said, there's this young woman out in Seattle who is giving, for every lash that she makes, she gives a set of lashes to somebody who's going through cancer treatment. And we think you should go do a story on her. So off I went to Seattle, and Karissa was making makeup in her kitchen. And we became friends. And that's how we ended up here today, because she was unbelievable at this incredibly, it was 10 years ago. Were you 14 then? I mean, you were young, right? Looks that way, okay?
If I was 14, you were 24. Yeah.
All right, so I had a great career doing all that, but it was never exactly like the perfectly fitting suit, because I had children. I have 4 children, and I had a husband whose career was bigger than mine, and I signed up for love. I signed up for all the stuff that comes with love, which involves a lot of sacrifice. But along the way, I got to do a lot of what I liked. I got to write about careers. I got to write about women and people pursuing their purpose. And I was putting together this kind of methodology in my mind, piece by piece, that was a lot around figuring out your values. But I knew that wasn't exactly it. But I was putting it all together. Well, in 2018, my husband got very sick. And by 2019, we knew that we were, here's the euphemism, out of options. Okay. We had hope, as we always do. I mean, I'm not the only person in the room who's been through this experience, so I know I'm not speaking like I've had a unique experience, but we kept on fighting, and we had so much hope. And then Jack was in the hospital, and our son got engaged, and we were overjoyed, and there was so much hope. And the doctor who had been treating Jack came in, and Jack said, I just have the greatest news in the world. Marcus got, and of course the doctors knew all the kids, and Marcus got engaged. And a few minutes later, the doctor said, hey, point to the hallway, and he said, when's the wedding? And I said, immediately knew what he was telling me. And I said, we were thinking in a year. And he said, let's see, can you do it in 6 months? So I had to then tell Jack that, and we were lucky. We got 8 months after that. So, but he was at the wedding, and he walked Marcus down the aisle. So we got that. And we knew that we were saying goodbye to each other. We knew that we had a long goodbye. And Jack used to say to me, let's talk about your life after I'm gone. You've given so much of your life to me. And now this is your turn. And I was not ready or prepared, or I just couldn't hear it. And I would say to him, I don't want to talk about it. And he'd say, no, I can help you so much. You're going to do X, Y, and Z. Let me help you do that now. Okay, you're going to sell this piece of the business that we're in together. Let me make the deal for you. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So, but then, he died. He did die. And it was March 1st, 2020. And then right after that, 2 weeks later, then came the pandemic. And I went to the woods with my kids. All the kids were home. We went to the woods. And after about a year of it, I had to say, well, what is next? There is actually going to be another life. I can't keep doing what I was doing, which was I was walking the dogs in the woods incessantly. The kids went home, and the dogs were like, enough is enough. I mean, at the time, I had a Great Pyrenees, was one of my dogs at the time. Happy, the Great Pyrenees. And that dog is like bred to just walk constantly. And I would say, time for another walk. And like, she would look at me with side eye, like, not another walk. And I was like, what else are we going to do? So I had to do something. And I actually was talking to my kids about it. They're all grown now. They're in their 30s. So they were grown up. And I said to my son, my oldest son, I think I have this idea for a methodology to help people figure out what they should do with their life. Now, here's the irony that I did not realize at the time, is like the most I was the person who needed it. Like I was like, Dr. Heal Thyself. I needed this methodology. And I didn't even get it. It was so meta. It was beyond me. I was like, I didn't. And so my son said to me, I think it should be called Becoming You. And I was like, that's the name of it. Then I had the outrageous audacity to bring it to the dean at the NYU Business School, who I knew from my previous life in business. And I said, I have this idea for a class that I wish I had taken when I was in business school. And I described it to him. And he said, well, that sounds great. Let's try it as an experiment, as an adjunct professor. Let's try it. But when you offer a class called Becoming You to a bunch of 20-somethings who are at business school to transition and to pivot, but that's why you don't go to business school if your career is going well. You go to business school if you got to pivot, right? If you hate your job, it's true.
I wish I would have had you saying that when I was younger.
I know, it's true. And so that class kind of took off because I was meeting them where they were. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. Why is it then when I'm teaching this methodology that I feel like I'm levitating? And I was like, oh, wait, I think I found my purpose. It works. And so the book, the class took off and was wonderfully received. And I was appointed to be a full professor. So I got to teach this a lot more. And I also teach management, which I love. So my old publisher from the other books came around and she said, well, it's time to write the book. And it's like, I'm never writing another book again. I just can't do it. And you know what I think was going on? I think I didn't want to write a book without Jack. I think that, when I look back at it, I was like, I'd written a book by myself, but the last 2 books I wrote were with him. And I thought about just sitting alone and doing the book. And so I actually thought I wasn't going to write the book. And I was getting a lot of pressure from my students who wanted their parents and their siblings and their spouses to do Becoming You. And I was getting like a lot of loving pressure from my publisher. And one day I was walking in the woods. If you've listened to my podcast, you've heard me tell this story, but I was walking in the woods with my daughter, Eve. So Eve is the 4th child. She's a marvelous person. She's an artist. She's a total hippie. She's like a very woo-woo hippie person, like very, and okay.
Who identifies that way?
She's been invited in right here in California. And she's like, always, Mom, just do what makes you happy. I don't think she said to me one time we were walking in the woods, I just don't believe people were put on earth to suffer like you do. And I was like, honey. And so, because I like to work. And so we were walking in the woods and I said to her, I'm just getting with the dogs. And I was like, I'm getting so much pressure to write this book. I can't take it. Everyone's asking me to write the book. And I thought Eve was going to say, you just got to follow your own bliss, Mom. I thought she was going to give me that, and instead she grabbed my arm and she said, write that book. And I was like, what? She said, you got to write it. You can't, now she's a big, she's a social justice warrior. And she said, it's wrong to keep this book just for people at NYU. You got to democratize it. It's not fair because what you're doing is helping people. And it's just these, she called them entitled students at NYU who are getting this thing that you do. It's not right. And as soon as she said it, I was like, okay, I said shit. And I was like, she's right. She's right. I want that. I want what she's saying. And I literally went into the house from the walk and called my publisher. And I said, okay, what's the due date? And she said, okay, can you get it to me by August or whatever it was? And I went home and I wrote the book. So that's how it happened. I was shamed by my daughter, Eve.
Well, that's a great lead into the area of transcendence. So I think that one of the things that I personally appreciate about this book in particular is that it really is a methodology for us to follow. And there are, I believe, 13 frameworks.
There's 13 steps to it.
Yes. And one that I think is really applicable. I mean, they're also applicable to all of us, but you really start out with this area of transcendence, or the AOT.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that, because that's really I think really the spirit of this book.
Yes. My rings are making too much noise. They're really cute, aren't they? Everybody appreciate that. And now I'm taking them off because it's like they're ringing in my ear. Okay. So, all right. So the AOT, area of transcendence, is your purpose. It's another word for purpose. And let me just explain what it means. When Maslow, and we're in LA, so you know who I mean. But when Maslow did his hierarchy of needs, he had at the top your biggest need was self-actualization. Then he went away and he did 14 years of research, and he actually said Actually, there's something above that. You can self-actualize, but most people also want to be connected to other people. They want to give back. And that's just not enough for most people. Self-actualization is a little bit self-absorbed. And most people, once they have that, think, wait, something's missing. Mm-hmm. And he came back with this construct saying, actually, the tippy top is transcendence. When you are self-actualizing and in some way helping the world or connecting the world or connected to something larger than yourself. And I think that this is an elegant way of talking about what purpose is. Mm-hmm. And so the way that's how we define AOT. Mm-hmm. And the way you get there with the Becoming You methodology is you collect 3 data sets. The first is your values, which incidentally, almost no one knows their values. And so it's a bit of excavation because most people don't even know what values are. They mix them up with virtues, which is very normal and natural and happens all the time because you can learn a lot of things in school, in high school and in college, but no one says, let me tell you the most important thing you need to know, what your values are. And you just walk away and you think, I think I know my values, I guess financial security and family, but there's actually 15 values. So the first part is doing the hard work of figuring out your values. And so there's some exercises in the book that get you there, but the king of all the exercises is the values bridge, which is a test that I actually developed that actually just cuts right to the chase. It's 100 questions. And if you haven't taken it already, and I love this test, there's a coupon to take it in your swag bag. So please take it because it will give you a list of your values. But beyond that, the important thing to understand is that you can have values, but you may not necessarily be living them. You can have them, but there's a question about how much you're expressing them. And in fact, when you're fully expressing them, that's your authentic life. But you can have I can't tell you the number of times I have students who come and their top value is voice, creative self-expression. And their gap between how much they have of that and how much they're living it can be like 98%. Okay. And they're like, yes, that's right. I can't be myself because of X, Y, Z. All right. So the first data set is your values. And that's important, deep work. The second set of data is incredibly important, but not quite as emotional. And that's your aptitudes. Like, what are you uniquely good at? Like everybody's kind of competent at everything, basically, there's sort of but like you have preloaded software on 8 cognitive aptitudes. Are you a generalist or a specialist? Are you a future focuser or a present focuser? Are you a brainstormer or an idea contributor, somebody who shepherds ideas? There's 8 big cognitive aptitudes. You know what they are, but you have to do the work of identifying them. Mm-hmm. The second part of aptitudes is a little trickier because it's your personality. Because you can be very good at some work because of your personality, and you can be kind of bad at some work because of your personality. And people kind of intuitively know that, and they tend to gravitate towards work eventually that matches their personality. But here's the thing. We are only getting our version of events about what our personality is. And my students like to tell me that they know what their personalities are. They're kind, they're generous, they're compassionate, they're good listeners. And I'm like, I hope so, but let's find out what the world thinks. Okay, let's actually see how the world's experiencing you. And there's always this kind of moment of truth. And I have people who come to my 3-day intensive, and there's a moment of truth where you find out, you do the test and you find out how the world is actually experiencing you. And, I go through this every semester with hundreds of students who say things like, but I thought I was great with people. And you're like, okay, maybe there's some room for growth, but it's important to know something. You've got to know this stuff. So there's those. And then the third data set is what kind of work actually calls you emotionally and intellectually that will pay you what you want to be paid. And our whole lives is a unfortunate exercise of closing our aperture down, down, down. And it starts, you would think, so there's research that shows that when kids come out of high school, they kind of know about 5 professions, 2 of which are their parents. Okay. And then there's 3 more. That's general population. Mm-hmm. Then you think it would be opened up in college. But in fact, in college, what sets in? Groupthink. Everybody's going into tech or, I hear there's good jobs in blah, blah, blah. And then, God forbid, you should go to graduate school. That's where the conveyor belt sort of goes right down to 2 jobs. Okay. Everybody in MBA is going to go into banking or consulting. And we lose this sense that the world has got these it's huge. There's 135 industries and there's lots and lots of different types of jobs. And we can lose sight of how big the world is and all the places. So that's a lot of data to gather about yourself. But there is a process. So we've done the process that you go through to figure out what's at the intersection of those 3 data sets. And there's your area of transcendence. I mean, again, not a hack, but it, like, we can do it in 3 days. It can be done. But it takes intention. It takes intention. And so I mean, look, I wish I had done this so many, decades earlier, but eventually most of us will kind of bump our way to our purpose. And then we think, why didn't I do it sooner? So that's what Becoming You is sort of the intervention for.
Oh, I love that so much. And for people out there who are afraid to dig in, I mean, some of these are sometimes scary things to dig into. And what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe like,
I think it's scarier not to know. I think it's scarier not to know. I just think there's such a, there's such a cost to regret. I mean, regret's a terrible thing. And one of the questions I ask in class is, is sort of one of the values diagnostics is, what would make you cry at your 85th birthday from regret? And, people just pour out their hearts about, I never became an entrepreneur. I never wrote the book. I never went to New Zealand. I never fixed my relationship. I never got sober. I never bought the house. And it's like, yeah, but are you going on a life right now not to have that moment of regret? And that's like a very convicting moment for people. You kind of know what's going to be the unfinished work if you don't get to it, and yet you don't. Okay, so why don't you? Well, there's these 4 forces. I call them the 4 horsemen of values destruction. And they gallop into our lives, and then they gallop away with our lives. And because I teach the youth, I have them all start with E so that they can remember them on the exam. So the first one is expectations. And that gets in the way of us living our authentic lives, is that I can't be this because that's not what somebody like me does. I had a student, an MBA student, and she went through the whole process, and her area of transcendence kept on showing up as Roomba teacher over and over again. And she was like, kept on coming to me saying, this cannot possibly be right. And I just was watching her struggle so much with it. She goes, this can't be right. And I said, really? Okay, why don't we go back and do the process again? Come to office hours. We'll try something else. And then it would come up again, Roomba teacher. And she was like, finally, like the 4th time, I said, like, what's the problem with this solution? Because all the data is saying it's Roomba teacher. And she said, MBAs cannot become Roomba teachers. And I was like, is that legislation in New York, or like, where is that rule? And she was like, well, what would my parents say? Well, I'm an MBA. And, she became like a software engineer, and it's fine. And she, I think she's going to be doing a lot of Roomba on the side, and okay, fine. But it's like, it was available to her. And so anyway, expectations are huge, but a lot of times they're the expectations we put on ourselves. I mean, so a little bit of that, she was blaming her parents, but it was a little bit her. I have so many students, but I could tell you stories about this, but expectations are interrupters of our true purpose. Then there's expedience. We can have a life of our dreams, and it's just easier. Okay, we can have values like we can love the intensity of a city, and we can love the excitement of a life of scope, one of the values. But it is just simply easier to have your kids in school in the suburbs, or it's just easier to get your groceries in when you live in a place. And I've seen people, I mean, expedience, I've done it. It's just easier sometimes it's a lot easier not to live your values. Okay, so there's expedience, then there's events. I mean, I drifted away from my values. I had every single value that would have put me back at work, but after Jack died, I walked the dogs a lot. Okay, and I didn't know who I was, and events had sort of taken my sense of self away until I fought hard to figure it out and get it back. And it was, it was not easy, but I did it. So, and then the last one is economic security, which is real. We have to pay the rent. We have mortgages. We have kids. We have cars. But I'm now, forgive me, gods of behavioral economics, but to sum up all of behavioral economics, I'm so glad that my colleagues are not here, but at this moment, but to sum up all of behavioral economics, it basically comes down to the fact that people will make decisions based on their financial impact, whether they care about money or not. And so people will say, like, I got this house in Greenwich. I worked for 40 years in a career I hated. I got the cars, the kids did this, and I didn't really care about all this stuff anyway. And they did it because of what behavioral economics would say is just the tendency to look at the number. The number is hard. So those 4 things, I mean, and sometimes all 4 of them at once. get right in the way of us living our purpose. And I totally empathize. I mean, the number of times in my life, I let them run away with my life because that's what we do.
Well, yeah. I mean, you start out the book actually so vulnerable, talking about your experience when you were the editor-in-chief of Harvard Business Review and what you experienced with losing your job for love. And, you know, talk about a moment, you know, and you talk about this with your students a lot where you say, like, I hope you get fired, you know, so, because it's going to teach you something. And so
I hope they don't get fired on the front page of the Wall Street Journal the way I was. I would not recommend that experience, but
And I think totally. And I would dare to say it was sexist what happened to you, but we'll just digress on that. That's me, not her saying that. I think that, you know, if you go back to that point in time, like what advice would you give to Suzy, editor-in-chief of Harvard Business Review?
I should have stood up for myself more. I think, you know, it was a crazy, thank God there was no social media then. But I mean, just for those of you who are not like, remember, like my students don't know this story because they weren't born then. Anyway, I met Jack and HBR fired me. And I mean, one of the greatest moments in my life was when the chairman of the board who actually fired me said it was the dumbest mistake we ever met. Now, he said it 20 years after it happened, so it didn't get me very far. But it was like, I think I just should have, I should have stood up I should have said it was wrong. And instead, when they did it, I just like I walked out of the office. I went home and I said to Jack, I'll never work again. He said, oh, get over yourself. And I was like, he said, you're crazy. You got fired. You're going to just pick yourself up. You're going to work again. And I was like, no, I'm never going to work again. He was like, pfft. And he was trying not to like mock me. He's like, this is a bad thing that happened. It's very unpleasant, but now we get to play. And I was like, I don't want to play. I want my job back. And that was about like 2 weeks went by. And then the editor of the Oprah magazine actually called. He said, oh, we see you're available now. Would you like to come and have a conversation about doing a column? And I hung up and I said, Jack, you won't believe what this is. And blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to go and talk to the Oprah people about writing a column for them. And he like literally laughed hysterically saying, oh, you're never going to work again. Boo-hoo. And so I learned my lesson, but I think that it taught me that what can feel like a terrible loss, like a gigantic bomb in our life, you know, that forces reinvention. You live. And that, you know, I often say to my students, in particularly in management, who's in this class has been fired? Now, these are MBAs, so they've worked previous years. And, you know, we get like a small spattering of hands. And I say to them, look, if you can afford it, I hope you're all fired very soon, because it gives you so much courage, you know, to later say like, okay, I'm risking something. I'm saying what I care about. I'm trying something very, very hard. If it doesn't work, I will live. I will live another day. I had to learn that at 40. And then I got bolder and I tried all sorts of hard things, and some didn't succeed and some did. But I thought, I'm going to fall down and I'm going to get up again. And you have to learn that you keep living.
And I think you are such a beautiful example of reinvention and continuing to grow and truly having a growth mindset, which is really what you're teaching us in this book is a framework to have the growth mindset. Because I think you can, there's the buzzword of, and whether you call it the happiness industrial complex. Yes. Yeah. But really, you know, I think this is, and many of us in this room talk about that there's never been a better time to be a woman in business and in the world. You know, there's a lot of challenges. So I don't want to say that there aren't, but I think you are such a beautiful example of continuing to grow, and like the fine wine that you are, like, I mean, you really are, you just keep getting better with time. And so how do you think about that? I mean, you have this beautiful arc of a career where you came up in a time where it wasn't ideal to be a woman. I mean, you were the editor-in-chief of a very, very prominent magazine in a time where it wasn't as advantageous to be a woman. So how do you think about that now? And
I'll say a crazy thing about it. And I think that I'm curious about this part of myself and I don't understand it. I think I never thought about it.
Yeah.
I just thought like look, I come from a Sicilian family, and there was a fierceness of those women. And there was a certain toughness. Yeah. And, you know, I was sent away to school when I was young, ninth grade. I went away to boarding school. went to Exeter. It had just started taking girls. There were no phones in the dorm. I talked to my parents once a month, and it was kind of like sink or swim. And I kind of had this like, and I'm sure other cultures have it, but this sort of like, I'm not going to let them, I'm just fear. I was just fierce, I guess, in a weird way. And I remember like I'd be sitting in classes and it would be all boys and me. And I thought I had two choices, which was to sort of focus on that or not focus on it. And I didn't think about it. And I remember like when I became the editor of HBR and they were talking about like, I like have these kids. And I remember somebody saying to me, like, can you actually be the editor of that magazine with children? And I was like, just watch me. No. And, I don't know. It was like a, but I get it. It's like when Me Too happened and it all came out, as I said, I have 4 children and I have 2 daughters. And my daughters said to me this funny thing. They said, did this ever happen to you, Mom? And I was like, of course it happened to me. In male newsrooms and like with clients. And I just got, so my generation, we just got very good at this, and I just did a lot of that. And I just kept going. And I don't know if what I did was good or bad. I don't know. It was me. I just was fierce in that way. And it was like when I heard that first analogy, like a woman has to do everything a man does, only dancing backwards and in high heels, I thought, yeah, that's right. I get it. And I must have done some of that. But I mean, I've seen men. Look, I have sons. I love men. They're good men. There's so many good men. I love my sons. And I think that I don't want to like blanket statement here, but I've definitely been mansplained and things like that. And fine. It happens to all of us. But it was like, there's this art to, taking it down and going forward. And I didn't want the narrative that I just wanted the narrative that I could write my own story.
Yeah. And you surely have.
Well, not without messy chapters.
Yeah. Well, all of us. And that's, I mean, Becoming You is really rooted in self-awareness as well. And I think that that's such a powerful and sometimes painful moment. So tell us about your moment of self-awareness as you've been going through this.
So many. I think actually it's sort of like the most underrated trait is self-awareness. It's like this ability to see yourself the way the world sees you. Look, sometimes it's really good. And I was on a podcast today with a very famous podcaster. And I was on his podcast because a mutual friend basically said, you got to do this. And he was not crazy about doing it, but he showed up to do it as a favor to this mutual friend. And right before we went on to the podcast, I said to him, look, I realize I'm a stuff job, but I think I'm going to try to make this as good a podcast as I can. And he, like, everything changed when he saw my self-awareness. Like, he was sitting there thinking, what a stuff job. And then right to his face, I said, I know what you're thinking, like, basically. And I said it like in a very kind of like lighthearted way. Like, and then afterwards I wrote him saying, given that I was a stuff job, I just want to thank you again for having me on your podcast. And totally disarmed. He said, nonsense, you were fabulous, blah, 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 blah. But I'm wondering, like, I just called him on what he was thinking. And I have found that this is a radically effective strategy my whole life long. And I think I don't know, like how we come about self-awareness. I think that I've always been surrounded by people who've told me exactly what they think, which is kind of a good and a bad thing. And I think there's a two-edged sword to it because I have preached this to I love this whole idea, Kim Scott's idea of radical candor. I teach it in both of my classes that I teach about
Great book.
Being able, it's fantastic, being able to say something that someone else needs to hear coming from a place of love. That's hard. But if we do it, somebody will do it back to us. My kids say the scariest thing that I say is the word lovingly, because when I say the word lovingly, that they know that the candor is coming next.
We have a value at Thrive Cosmetics called Candor is Kind.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was definitely inspired by your book winning.
Yeah. Well, Karissa did a total star turn coming to speak to my management class when I was teaching about culture. And I thought, let's get a fantastic CEO in here to talk about it. And when I saw that value of yours, Candor is Kind, I was like, sing. It's so true. Candor is kind. Yes. Because wouldn't everybody prefer the hard truth to a soft lie?
Okay, but give us a tip though, because not all of us, it's so hard.
Okay, here's my tip.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think we do this in my company because I believe so much in radical candor. I think that the way to do it is to warn people you're about to do it. So I like this way of sort of saying, look, I really operate from a place of radical candor. Radical candor means that I want to say something that I think that you would be better off knowing. But I want you to understand, I'm coming from a place of love and wanting you to be better and friendship. And then you say it. Okay. I think you got to warn people when you're about to do it. And now the shorthand that we use in my company is in a spirit of radical candor. We don't have to go through the whole spiel. And then we also say, it's so shortened with my children that I just say the word lovingly and they're like, here it comes. But I think that when we start using it, we have to warm people up to the fact that we're using it. And you say, okay, I want to tell you something I think you'd be better off knowing. I love that phrase. Okay. Stole it from Kim Scott. She's the queen. But I want you to understand, I'm coming from a place of loving you or liking you or friendship and wanting you to be better, and then drop the bomb in a way that people can hear. So that's my tip. And it's an art, though. Look, I was not great at this. I was 100% the classic way where we don't say it and we hold it in and we think we're doing the person the favor. It would just be so mean if they knew it. Then I met Jack. He was absolutely a constant radical candor person. And we were like out on a date. It was like before we were even married. And we went to a restaurant and the waitress came over to the table and he said, what do you recommend? And she said, why don't you get the blah, blah, blah? And he said, okay. And I said, I'll get it too. So it comes to the table and we're eating it. It's absolutely inedible. It's so bad. Like I'm moving the food around on my plate. Like I can't put it in my mouth. And the waitress comes over and he goes, this was terrible. And I jumped out of my skin. Like, you can't tell the waitress that, it's so rude. And her reaction was like, huh, it is so bad. And the chef is forcing us to get it out onto the tables. And I'm going to go back and you've done me a huge favor. I'm going to go back and tell the chef how bad it is. And we had a person say how bad it was. And he goes, thank you. And he said, like, is this the worst part of your job? She said, it's the worst part of my job that I have to sell something I don't believe people. And they got this little banter about it. And I thought, holy guacamole, you could just say the truth like that and people appreciate it. And so I started trying it. And sometimes it's a little hard. And I mean, I have used it and it's like I changed the academic standards in one of my classes. And I told my students, I'm making the class harder this semester because when you go out and represent Stern, I want you to be great because your reputation depends on it. And so does mine. I'm associated with this school also. And that did not go over very well. So I'm not going to do that again. But I was being really radically candid with them. And they were like, just stop giving us quizzes. But I wanted them to understand why I was doing it. And maybe I should have I probably will do it again because I'm such a believer in radical candor. So I think, you got to understand that sometimes people don't like hearing it. But if you're delivering it, it takes a while. This is not an overnight thing.
Yeah, it is tough. And it's a muscle, right? That we have to keep building.
Yes, absolutely.
So talk to us on the flip side, because the other side of that is receiving feedback.
Yeah.
Help us receive feedback in a way that doesn't come across as defensive.
I have a hack.
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, right. Aren't we all? All right, I have 2 hacks for receiving difficult feedback, which we all get and we have to ask for. And so here they are. Number 1, force yourself to smile while you're receiving it. And if you do that, the person will keep talking and you'll eventually hear it. Okay. And so you just have to force yourself to say, keep going. I'm hearing you. And so that's just a lie with your face, but you've got to do it. So you keep hearing it. And then I did this thing. It was a crazy mind game where as they're speaking to me, I literally keep saying over and over again to myself, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. And this is like a game with my own brain to stay in receive mode. And I don't start making the case about why they're wrong. And I have utilized this like little tool for 20 years. I think it's held me in incredibly good stead. And I teach it to my students. And it's just to smile and say, maybe they're right. And sometimes you're feeling like they're totally wrong. And I want to punch them in the nose. But it is like the best you can. You've got to hear it. You've got to hear it. And so people are bad at giving feedback. And so usually they do this thing that's not a very big favor to you, but they do it anyway, which is they say something like this. We're so happy you work here. And, you're just the heart of the team and you just bring so much to the table. You really are. And then they say the terrible thing. but we've noticed that like all the clients hate you or whatever. They say something that's just so bad. And then they wrap it up in the end and they say, but we just love you. And you were so great at the Halloween party. Everyone loved your costume, and it's like this sandwich with a little bit of the truth in the middle. And then you walk out and you're like, what was the true part? But imagine if you sort of were like saying like, maybe they're right, maybe they're right. And then you stopped and you said, can we just go back to that little part in the middle? Maybe they're right, maybe they're right. And you make them keep talking to you about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, and there's a lesson in it, right? Like it doesn't mean that it's the whole truth, but there is a lesson in it, whether it's, self-awareness to how we're showing up in the world.
Yeah.
So thank you for those tips.
Thank you.
And we all want to go to the School of Suzy.
Yeah. Well, I think that, thank you.
Well, we can.
You can.
Her podcast.
I teach my podcast.
Yeah.
I teach the 3-day. I have 3-day people here. Who came to the 3-day in New York.
Tell us about the 3-day. I think this is a really special.
Go ahead, give me some radical candor. How was the 3-day? All right. It's intense though.
Yeah, it was intense.
Yeah.
Like, all day. And
yes.
You're trying to process. So
yes.
Processing a little bit.
But we have fun parties. We put a party at the beginning and a party afterwards.
It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of camaraderie.
It's intense because we do the whole book in 3 days, and it's.
Oh wow. We're like sleeping about it.
I know. I mean, the first time I did it, I was like, can we possibly do Becoming You in 3 days? And it was like one of those, I'm going to try. And it works. And, actually, the intensity of it is kind of, the momentum of it is not a bad thing. But you don't get to do all the processing that the students who take it over 8 weeks get to process it and wallow in it a bit more. But, I mean, nobody can give you 8 weeks. I mean, I also used to do it in a 1 day. People came from around the world for just 1 day. I would jam everything I could into 1 day. And then I just made this decision. I can't do that anymore. It just doesn't do. You can't find your purpose in 1 day. And I had to wave the white flag and say, I can't do that. It's not fair to everybody. There's too much in it. So, yeah.
Well, we can still go on the journey by reading your book.
Yes, yep,
and
absolutely.
the audiobook. So I read the book originally. I was privileged to get an advanced copy, and it was incredible. And the audiobook, you bring so much fun and personality. I love how you tell the stories.
Thank you.
Your classic Suzy voice that we love.
No.
And for those of us who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, like what is the one takeaway that you have? There's so many rich lessons. So I know this is like asking your favorite product, but what's
what is your favorite product? Is it the mascara?
Don't ask that. No.
What is it?
What is my favorite product? I think Infinity Waterproof Eyeliner is my favorite product. I joke that it's my firstborn child. Because it taught me so many lessons. I wiped out my personal bank account to fund it after I thought I had an angel investor, which didn't happen. That didn't wind up coming to fruition. And it sat on my apartment floor for a year and a half. And I hand assembled with my family and friends the cartons around it.
I want your book. That's what I want.
No.
Right?
This needs to come back to you, though.
Right.
But if you're going to ask me, Infinity Waterproof Eyeliner really did teach me to never give up. And it was our community who built that product. So anyway, back to you.
Right.
What's our takeaway, Suzy?
Okay. I think that if I had to sum it all up in one line, it would be that it is better to be the author of your life than the editor. And no shade to editors. Okay, I was an editor, and we all need editors, but we often have many editors, and we don't ever put the pen into our own hand. Okay, and there's this moment when you become the author of your life instead of the editor. And look, when I had kids and bosses, and Jack was still living, I used to say there's a lot of shareholders in Suzy Inc. And that was the way I kind of explained it. And then when I look back, I think being the author of my own life was there for the taking. I just didn't have the language to explain to people what that life looked like. And then I got to a place in my life where I was the author of my life, and I was able to explain why I was writing the book the way I was writing it. The book of the narrative of my life. And it was like I felt very exquisitely alive. I mean, this is why I want everyone to have that feeling. It's scary. It's an act of courage. I mean, it is a brave thing for us to do as women, because we are socialized
Mm-hmm.
to have a lot of people helping us write our narrative, and it starts with our parents. I mean, it's not it's I did it to my own kids. I did it to my boys. I was I watched my own oldest son very bravely say, enough is enough, Mom, I want my own life. And I had to let him put the pen in his own hand. So it happens to all of us. And I was editing him every inch of the way because I wanted him to be just like me. And he didn't want to be just like me. And our relationship got so much better when I was finally able to say, I'm just going to love you exactly as you are. I mean, this is what I preach, and I'm going to preach it and live it with you. And it's kind of an amazing experience when you let people do that, and you want that to happen for yourself too. So it has to happen. It's with intention, because you've got to take the pen. It doesn't start in your own hand, and you have to put it there.
That's so beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Suzy. Suzy is here to sign books and take pictures, and we're so excited about that.
Yeah,
so
thank you, Karissa. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your story with us and for this beautiful body of work.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. All right. Thanks.